What's up guys, another day, another vlog. I have 2 points I want to talk about today. Number 1, karate has to be combative. And number 2, when you guys see karate as clinch fighting, yes, we need to learn the grappling and we need to master that, but the grappling leads to strikes. At the end of the day, you are learning how to strike, kick, punch. Yes, there are takedowns, but strikes set up the takedown. And you see a lot of footage on this channel about grappling and joint manipulations and everything like that. I fixate on that because that's a huge piece that's missing in the karate world. If you guys don't know and you guys are new to this channel, karate came from Okinawa. Their indigenous form of martial arts was grappling, and now they added the striking version of it. What you see in karate nowadays is a very long range kind of point-based fighting style with a lot of footwork, and that's not how it was. With that said, you cannot strike effectively within the clinch or strike effectively when someone's trying to take you down if you don't know how to grapple yourself, if you don't have understanding of the clinch range, if you don't have an understanding of posture and grappling footwork. And that footwork means like there's tension within the clinch. Jiu-jitsu sells this really well, especially self-defense jiu-jitsu, which nowadays is rare and few and far between. The most common explanation is if someone were to punch you and they're like an arm's length away, if they threw a really hard haymaker from a level of 1 to 10, how hard would that haymaker be, right? Generally speaking, it's going to be a 10 because that's their whole body, their entire momentum's behind that punch. Now, if you are like in the clinch range, your hands are tied up, and you throw a punch from there, that punch is now like a 4 or a 5. Now, if you're super tight and you wrapped up their arms and they try to punch you, that punch is now like a 1. If they even hit you, it's a 1 or a 2. A 1 or a 2 is never going to knock you out. A 4 or 5 might daze you. A 10 with good contact, for sure it's going to end the fight, it's going to knock you out. A lot of karate guys, they think, oh, I'm going to knock him out from a distance no matter what. My rebuttal is always, what if it doesn't work? The range is already closed, now you're in the clinch. Now whose game are you in? Are you good enough in the clinch that you can effectively create space again and try again? Are you good enough within a clinch that you can get an angle and start striking from there? Can you set up 4 or 5 level punches within a clinch and not get taken down yourself? So all these what if scenarios, and a little tangent from that, I always welcome what if questions within my class, even the kids class. Even if it takes me off to a tangent that's 10 minutes long, I will address that what if because that's what's fresh in their mind, and you need to address those doubts before you continue on with the same technique, or they're always going to have that doubt. Again, that doesn't mean every student needs to interrupt class every few minutes and just say what if, but if it's a genuine question, like you're showing a technique and a student asks, hey, what if this happens? Well, I would address that and then continue back onto the technique. So that's the tangent of this tangent. So again, when we say karate grappling or tegumi or whatever you want to call it, the goal is not to become a wrestler. The goal is to be competent enough that you can wrestle within the clinch so that you could set up your strikes, or wrestle within the clinch so that your strikes can set up the takedown, or wrestle within the clinch that you can just take them down and strike them when they're on the ground. All these things are possible scenarios, but they're only possible if you've mastered the clinch range. And I see a lot of videos of people doing drills that look clinch specific, but their fundamentals aren't always there. And you can kind of tell, like, that footing would not work, that frame would not work. Yes, you have a joint lock on a person in demonstration, but if they add a little resistance, they could just stand up from there. Most people are able to see these things. I can see these things really well. Karate guys, you do a disservice to the people you're teaching if you're trying to say, hey, this is karate grappling, this is clinch range fighting, but you don't have the time on the mats or the experience or the hours of failing to make it work upon resistance, right? And I challenge you guys, your instructors, like, you need to, one, if your school or if your instructor did not teach you pressure testing and this type of clinch range fighting, find a style that does and add it to your style. That's what the old Okinawans did. They traded and they integrated other people's styles and teachings. Never was there a case of these like exclusivity where you're just staying within your own box. And again, I've said this before, cross training doesn't mean now you are training in multiple styles. It means you're training in different skill sets to level up your own karate, right? Your own expression of karate. But yeah, that's a necessity. If you're gonna teach something in the clinch range, you need to be proficient within the clinch range. What people might not realize is that the striking range is not as nuanced as the clinch range. People always say like a puncher's chance, right? Or a boxer getting a lucky punch, an untrained person getting a lucky punch. There's no lucky submission. There's no lucky takedown. There's no lucky grappling technique. Because so many things have to be done right in sequential order for you to execute the thing that you want. Of course, if you add strikes within a clinch, it makes it a lot easier. It lets you shortchange a lot of the steps. It breaks their posture easier. It makes them react and cover their head. All these things, when you add strikes within a clinch, it makes it a lot easier to execute all those things. What I mean with people when we just work on clinch fighting without the strikes, it's because that's a huge deficit in the karate community. And that's kind of what I excel at. That's what I pursued. And that's kind of what I want to push and promote. What's the second point? Martial arts needs to be combative foremost. And I mentioned this in other videos, but I think that'll be the title of this video. There is the art version of martial arts, right? The other half, which is make things look aesthetically pleasing, the mental release, the stress release, the meditative nature of it. But you can get that from tons of other hobbies and tons of other arts, right? You can get it from music, you can get it from actual painting, you can get it from sculpting, you can get it from doing other sports, even other physical things. You can get that type of discipline and relief from. But martial arts foremost is combative, and you need to treat it that way. And that means you need to be very self-reflective in the sense like, am I truly learning this thing that can potentially save my life one day or save the life of another? If I'm just focusing on how to kick higher, if I'm just focusing on how to make my punches snappier, right? And I feel like I'm repeating myself from another video, but it needs to be repeated over and over again, because karate nowadays has a bad rep just because people do it for kata competitions, people do it for tag sparring and winning medals and trophies and stuff. And you see it in the katas now that are really prevalent, in the kata tournaments now that are really prevalent. It looks great and sharp and snappy, but there's no body behind it. And that's very different than even 30 years ago, 40 years ago of the older generation doing kata. I look at kata videos from 30, 40 years ago, and these old Okinawans, these old Japanese guys are like falling over with a punch, even in a kata. And aesthetically, it doesn't look sharp. There aren't clean lines, blah blah blah. But you could tell that punch would do damage if it hit somebody. If you see a punch in a kata and you look at it and you're like, that would bounce off of somebody. I see a lot of champion kata practitioners that create very sharp punches, but that would not do damage past a couple inches, right? You can imagine a punch that would push somebody back in addition to cracking some ribs, right? What would it take to make a kata look like that? What would it take to change the narrative to say, hey, this is aesthetically pleasing? The viciousness, the demonic nature of this kata, the fact that when someone punches air, you could feel it in your bones, that's aesthetically pleasing. There's beauty in that violence because I know it's effective. And when I see a kata, when it's done in that nature, when it's done with ill intent, and you can see the person visualizing that bone breaking, you can see the person visualizing the broken rib, the KO that he just did on this imaginary opponent, attacker. I get chills thinking about that, because it's like, this guy's not only have put in the physical work, because you can only get that when you're punching makiwara or punching a heavy bag and translate that to a kata, but he's also put in the mental work. He's fighting the demons inside of him, where he's literally having fights over and over and over in his mind visually. In high school, I was talking to a friend about this. I was like, it'll be cool to have some anime character or something that's like, he's been through 1,000 fights without having been through one, right? And it's this idea, I guess I'll talk about this. I had a dream when I was like 14, 15, and it changed the trajectory of my martial art path. I still remember it like 20 years later. So in the dream, I'm walking down this dark alley, just like everyone says, right? We're walking down a dark alley at 3 in the morning, and there's like, it's dimly lit. There's shadows everywhere. It's there's a lot of dark spots in the alleyway. But as I'm walking around, I see limbs coming at me, right? And I executed the katas that I knew at the time. You know, limb at me, break the limb. Punch the face, twist the neck, break the ankle, break the knee, blah blah. As I'm walking through this hallway scene, right, this alleyway, and this was like, I don't know, 10 seconds. I remember 4 or 5 different limbs. I remember tapping into this primal nature of just kill or be killed, fight or flight. I make it to the end of the alleyway, and I look back, and I just remember just bodies on the floor, right, on the alleyway concrete. And then it's kind of embarrassing, but I just started weeping, and I woke up and I was like, tears in my eyes. So I was crying in my dream, and I woke up and I was still crying. This was like at 14, so you could tell where my head was at. But from that moment forward, I was like, that's how you should see kata. Every single block, every single punch should be that visualization of a limb coming at you, and it manifests itself. And I was lucky in high school to train at a Shorin Ryu dojo where the Shihan was like, he had a very intimidating kata face, right? And he promoted this idea, like, you tap into this evil nature that you have when a kata starts, because you have to visualize the fight, right? And I kind of took that to heart as a impressionable 14, 15-year-old. That really opened the mind for me to think about this idea that kata is for fighting. But yeah, even nowadays when I do kata, it's very rarely, unless I'm just walking through it to make sure I remember it, I'll just drill 1 or 2 sections of a kata over and over again and just visualize that thing. I think I went off tangent. So again, talking about that character, that anime character, the person who's trained or fought 1,000 fights without having fought one, is the idea that he's put in all this work to do the kata, and to the point where his visualization is real to him. And that's always cool to me, because you're like, what if I was able to get the real work in, or get the mental work in of having a real fight without having to do damage to somebody? And that's kind of what this whole thing was. This dream, this manifestation of that, this character that I visualized, that's kind of what I brought into my kata, and that's how it's always been from that moment forward. So yeah, let me know what you guys think. That was a little rambly, but yeah, another vlog, another day. Train hard, fight easy.